Hello and welcome to Making Revenue Tick. This week we're going to talk about the role of a fractional chief revenue officer, and I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Boronin. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Alex and I had a conversation, and it was such a good conversation where his explanation of the difference between fractionals and consultants, and particularly the role of a fractional CRO, was so refreshing and so different from what I'd heard before. I thought we have to get Alex on to share his story and his take on what he does and how it's so effective in the marketplace today. So, Alex, could you, for anyone who doesn't know you already, introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Richard. Again, pleasure for having me. My name is Alex. I'm basically been in sales for all my life, over 20 years in sales. And for the past 10 years, I was helping mainly SaaS startups, to find their way in a very difficult and challenging environment, especially, in the last year and a half, where I became fully fractional. Before I was doing the full-time roles as a VP sales or chief revenue officer. And for the past year and a half, I was helping different startups out there, mainly SaaS, to really, get their foot, in a very exciting world of SaaS, but also, very challenging world of sales, especially in 2023.
Absolutely. Perfect. So I think if we talked about this, who could this be for, Alex, right? And I think that there's probably going to be two groups of people that are listening to this. One would be VCs and PEs who are looking to invest in their portfolio of companies and make sure they're putting the right resources in place and giving them a really good chance of being successful. But there's also founders who might not be ready to hire a full-time chief revenue officer. They might have some talent in their team that they want to go and get upskilled and up-leveled and bring in some of the expertise of someone like you for a fraction of the risk and a fraction of the cost, or a number of different things. So it's definitely for those types of people. I think what we'd love to do is talk about what are the varieties of different options of roles that are available to VCs and founders within the CRO type community, and also some of the really practical tips and strategies that someone like you might be able to bring into the business that are unique to someone that is in a fractional role. So I suppose if I can kick it off with a couple of questions, could you explain the different types of fractional roles that are available within the tech industry and how they cater to various startups?
Absolutely, yes, Richard. I would highlight two major types of roles. Obviously, when it comes to commercial fractional roles, I would say go-to-market leader and the execution leader. And why I differentiate the two, because, for many perhaps founders or VCs, they might think it's actually the same thing, somebody who just drives the go-to-market forward. Unfortunately, in my experience, it doesn't always work this way. Each startup goes through the same life cycle, and that starts with basically defining the go-to-market strategy and then executing it. And there are only four ways of how it can develop for any startup out there, right? It's a great plan that is executed well. It's a great plan that is executed badly. It's a bad plan that is executed well, and it's a bad plan that is executed badly. So only four ways how it can go basically for any startup out there, and this all starts with putting together the go-to-market strategy. So that gives you an idea, what type of leaders are required to create a great plan and execute it well. Because we obviously want, create a great plan and we want to execute it well. And it all starts with the creation of go-to-market strategy, and that requires a special type of fractional leader that has the required level of expertise and experience in not only putting together the go-to-market plans, but ideally, within similar companies, product types, industries, sales velocity, and so on. And that, in my personal experience, that one type of person that normally, very much a strategist and had experience putting those go-to-market plans and been through several, cycles with various companies, ideally. So once the plan that makes sense for all the stakeholders and not just the founders has been created and finalized, then it's time to start executing. Will the same fractional leader that has put together the go-to-market plan will be able to execute it well? In my 20 years of experience, I'm yet to come across one. Why? Because execution is so much more complex than putting together the strategy that requires a different skill set. Talking to the founders, I always use the analogy with the doctors. Do you want the PhD student who has completed a thesis on appendix removal to perform the surgery on you, or rather you prefer someone who has been operating it day in, day out for 5 years straight? And obviously the answer is obvious, right?
Sure.
So in a very basic terms, there is a strategist and a doer. And unfortunately for the founders, those are mostly two different people.
Sure.
So that's pretty much my take on the different roles. And if you want me to like define the roles, particular how I see them, it will really depend on the strategy. Or let's say there are only two types of kind of like strategies for the startups. The first one normally starts with they can go two ways. The first strategy is, okay, I hire the first sales hire, the so-called sales pioneer, so somebody who will go the extra mile. They will confirm the product market fit the sales way and not the founder's way by selling to their own network, which is, kind of like selling to the network is fine, but that doesn't confirm the product market fit nor the go-to-market motion that leads to predictable revenue. And that person that strategy is, by hiring the sales pioneer when ideally the product market fit is kind of already there, or if not there, that person is there to confirm it the sales way. And the second role, or the strategy, is hiring someone like myself, chief revenue officer or VP sales type of role, someone who has been there, done it with a similar startup, similar product, similar strategy, similar industry, ICP, sales velocity, average sales cycles, and so on, to actually, execute on the go-to-market plan, but obviously, more strategic in terms of, okay, let's hire the sales pioneer, let's be there, let's close some demos myself, let's define, the right processes, put together strategy, people, process, systems, metrics, and so on. So this is, that's why for me, there are two main different strategies. Obviously, ideally, you want, if you have time and resources and expertise and you admit it to yourself that you can afford and you should hire somebody like myself to help you drive the go-to-market, that's obviously the recommended path. Not every startup, unfortunately, have the resources or ability sometimes of the founders to admit that they are in the position to actually ask for help, put it this way. They go the first strategy, which is confirm the product market fit either by themselves, because many startup founders, they are being the sales pioneers themselves and they try to go out there and sell to their network, or hire the first sales hire and then try to confirm and execute and get some go-to-market motion this way. So that's pretty much my take on the roles and how they can differ depending on the strategy that you choose.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess it also, so there's which type of founder is it? It could be a technical founder. It could be the sales pioneer type founder. They need kind of different support, but you've also got different stages, right? You've got pre-seed, seed, and then maybe, even angel, Series A, even Series B could need a fractional person. And in my experience, some of the earlier stage companies, they just think, right, well, the next role to hire is the CRO, but maybe they're not ready for a CRO. And when they start seeing, well, what does a CRO command in terms of salary, wherever they are in the world, often those numbers just go, the jaws drop because they realize they just can't afford it. But in reality, they probably just don't need it yet. Like I suppose there's a massive education piece here around what is the set of circumstances and criteria that you would go, right, we're now in a position where we actually need to go and take on this role. And then, well, do we need to go and hire a full-time person, or do we need to go and get a different option? And then my experience, when I've spoken to founders and you talk about fractionals, sometimes their initial response is to say, we don't want more expensive consultants. Because exactly like you've said, they're worried about spending a bunch of money on strategy, but without actually having someone who can then go and execute it. And particularly in the world of startups with earlier stage companies, actually taking a plan through the countless numbers of failures that you have to go and face and actually go and get the results from to work out what's going to work and what's going to not work, you have to have the execution part probably more than the strategy part, probably a more
100%.
important piece of the puzzle. What's your take on, so let's say there's some founders watching this and they're thinking, right, well, what do I actually need? Am I ready for a full-time CRO, or this option of having fractionals? What are the differences between full-time and fractional in terms of the kind of impact and the responsibilities that those different types of model might have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, for anyone who is thinking, hiring the full-time CRO, I would, definitely encourage them to make sure that, the fundamentals, first of all, the product market fit is there. That's what, it all starts with that, right? And the product market fit is there, in terms of founder selling exclusively to the network first, right? Then founder-led sales outside of their network. Okay. Then, the building and scaling the go-to-market motion with a sales pioneer. So you have to go through those steps already, in order to consider hiring perhaps, the sales leader, especially full-time sales leader. Without, go-to-market motion, repeatability, predictable revenue, it just, trust me, it often goes bad. Because at best, the expectation for the first sales hire around meeting KPIs, pipeline creation, sales cycle length, revenue generation are always wrong. So, first of all, you need to complete certain steps as an early stage startup to get to the point where you need to hire your first head of sales, VP sales, chief revenue officer, to get there. So that would be my first take in terms of, what you need to complete as an early stage startup. But then, of course, the difference between the roles itself, for me, honestly, any B2B CEO need to get prospects into the meeting and convert them into the revenue. That's a given, right? And whatever you call the role, chief revenue officer, VP sales, you will wear many caps, and that's normal. So the initial goal, the end goal is to identify the right buyers and convert them quickly, irrespective if you are fractional or you're full-time. An experienced chief revenue officer can build you a nice sales engine, test messaging, hire, train, manage, inspire sales team, move prospects throughout the different stages of buying and close the deals. The key word here is experienced. If you're an early stage startup, how likely will your early stage startup attract the experienced and successful VP sales or chief revenue officer, which means highly paid one, who has done it and proved himself or herself over and over again? I tell you, close to zero. Why? Well, you should put yourself in that CRO's or VP sales shoes. Why does he or she need to put a few years of their lives into jeopardy with no guaranteed success? If they're proven and done it over and over again, they would either pick the series A or B or C with a clear trajectory, clear growth trajectory, healthy balance book, and predictable revenue streams for themselves.
Sure.
Or would go fractional, to get a better work-life balance, more challenges than just, at one company at a time, and potentially even more money. So in this case, for me, I don't see, too many differences between the fractional CRO, the full-time CRO, of course, depending on how many hours you can commit. But again, the overall discussion perhaps, brings us to key benefits or the differences between the fractional role, of which there are many. But I would really highlight the three key benefits for the founders, for this, and for the VCs, that consist of, really three. The cost effectiveness is one of them. The access to the specialized expertise, and the reduced risk of hiring the wrong executive. And I can, I can kind of go into details in each of them, or very quickly. In terms of the cost effectiveness, I would say in a mid-sized to large scale company, from my experience, at least 25% of the leader's time is spent on communication, internal meetings with the management, relationship building with either direct reports or cross-functional relationships, These relationships are key to the leader's long-term success within an organization, but they're almost irrelevant for the fractional role. And that's what makes a huge difference in terms of cost saving, cost effectiveness. That means that that time can be spent by the fractional leader or executive for actually moving the needle, rather than trying to play the politics, create great relationships with all the cross-functional people, like direct reports or indirect reports. Their job is to move the needle and get the company to the desired results as quickly as possible, and they are being judged on it. And that's pretty much the only, I would say, the only goal for the fractional and the main objective that they have to fulfill. And obviously, when you are in a full-time position, as I mentioned, there is so much other things that you will be focusing on, because you have to play those, let's say, politics or games or internal, internal sort of bureaucracy.
Sure.
Sometimes that you have to adjust to, and you have to kind of like play by the rules, and that's why the cost effectiveness plays a huge part here. The second one is access to specialized expertise. That is also, the beauty of fractional executives, is the opportunity to bring the right leader for the stage of your business you are at. Meaning that the company can work with the leader they need to conquer their current growth stage without concern for how they will have to navigate the next chapter.
Sure.
And that's what I've also seen, quite a lot. And even myself, I've been in a position when I was a full-time leader for the company, where I grew the company from, let's say, 0 to 10 million ARR, and then suddenly the next phase growth, which requires us to take us from 10 to 50 million ARR, require a different skill set. Or adaptability from my point of view. I was kind of almost pushed into the chief revenue officer role from the VP sales role, which I didn't enjoy at all. And I told to my founder, listen, this is something that is not really my cup of tea. I'd rather prefer to be with my team, on the front line, closing the deals, being there for the guys, talking to the customers on a daily basis. When obviously the stage of the company was already there, where you needed to do so much more internal stuff, actually
Sure.
talking to different departments, different heads, be on those internal meetings and strategy meetings almost 50% of your time, which again require different type of profile.
Sure.
So and that's very often companies ended up there, where you either have to part the ways, or you have to adapt, or you have to push your VP sales or your chief revenue officer somewhere where they don't want to be, or they don't have the required skills.
Sure.
And the final one, the reduced risk of hiring their own executive, is someone correlates with with the second one. But as the tech industry continues to navigate the economic downturn in 2024, companies often react in two ways. They either reduce the full-time headcount and they bring contractors, or they reduce the contractors and bring more internal resources.
Sure.
Either way, any company reducing the headcount will benefit from the growing pool of leaders available to help companies, to get from one stage to the next without a full-time salary or long-term commitment or long-term cost risk associated with the hiring the wrong executive. Which again, yourself, being in the hiring industry, the cost of mishire is very, very costly, or very, very high. It sometimes takes 6 to 12 months just to find the right leader for the position. Then obviously, you have to give them 3 to 6 months to perform in order to actually, see if that's the right position or not, or the right type of leader or not for your company and your stage. That means that easily, you lose a year or year and a half, and that is very, very crucial, especially in early stage companies where the cash burn and investors are requiring. Investors' requirements are very strict. So
sure.
That's pretty much the three benefits of the fractional, or key three benefits of the fractional leaders out there.
Yeah, it's fascinating what you see, and I can relate to it so much from my own personal story. I was an operations director and then promoted to a business unit director, and spent much less of my time in that role working where my unique abilities were, which is with people. So exactly like you said, and I think a lot of people would go through that transition when you're looking to hire the next talent. pool, the next level of talent, you often look in your organization, you promote that person up. And one of the major benefits of a fractional person to come in is that they can actually be that mentor and that coach to effectively make that succession planning happen, because there's nothing worse than being promoted into a position where you aren't given the right tools or time, or you just aren't managed in the right way and you aren't having things explained in the right way to actually go and make that role a success. And actually, if you had a buddy that was brought in by the company to make that transition happen, not only would you have a better plan, but it would de-risk it for the business. And then that's an absolute winner. And then there's a few other things that you've covered there, which is just fascinating in terms of the different stages. Because you're absolutely right. If you're hiring a full-time person, you want to know that they're going to be able to be at least really effective for a couple of years. But the needs of the business today versus where they're going to be in a couple of years' time will be completely different. And will that person be fit for purpose, or even want to be the person who's going to take that challenge through the next stage? So it's a really complicated hire to get right. And you also talked about the cost. The data on this is crazily high. So from top grading, they say that it can cost up to 27 times the annual salary to make a mishire. And when those high numbers within that range that they give are talked about, it's at this senior level where the time to replace, the missed cost of opportunity, plus just the investment that you've had to make in terms of that person is so much higher. So I suppose before we move on to the next topic, based on all of those things, people moving into roles that they might not be ready for, the complexity of hiring the person who is going to be able to give you at least a sort of 2-year period of really successful growth, and knowing that you might have to change that person once you reach that next phase. How does a founder deal with all of that stuff? How does a founder who's trying to face those sorts of decisions start to think about that in a way that's going to help them to make the right decision?
Yeah, that's definitely keeps founders awake at night, I'm sure. Especially when it comes to the chief revenue officer positions, where you can easily go up to $500,000 a year, salary. So you just mentioned yourself, right? It can cost you 20 times, full-time monthly salary. So that's a crazy number.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, it really is difficult. And I guess, in order to de-risk it as much as possible, that's perhaps, that's one of the reasons, I guess, why the fractional community is booming. Because many great leaders realize that they can go out there and help a lot of companies to navigate and find their way using their past, experience and expertise. And it works, it's a win-win.
Yeah,
absolutely, right. Absolutely, and that's what I'm seeing, a lot since the, I would say, end of 2022. The rise of fractional been enormous, across various roles and positions, and not just commercial roles, but look at marketing, look at tech. I know so many great CMOs and CTOs doing fractional these days, and it seems like they're doing a great job, based on what I'm hearing, based on the referrals they receive on LinkedIn and so on.
Yeah.
So in terms of really, if I would be running my own startup and just kind of starting and navigating, I would definitely go fractional. I wouldn't hire. For me to risk to hire somebody full time from the cost perspective, time perspective, the adaptability, it's so high, and plus taxes, all other things that you have to consider. For me to hire fractional on a freelance or the contract is so much better, economically, but also risk-wise, because I will quickly know, the pressure probably on fractional is even more to deliver the results quickly, right? Yeah. So I will very quickly know, if that's the right fit for me or not. Probably, maximum, 3 months. That's maximum, sure. But more like a month. And then again, for me to cut the contract with a fractional leader will be so much easier than to do it once the leader passed the probation. Especially in countries like Germany or any other European jurisdictions, or the US for that matter as well. Yeah. So again, it's only a win-win really if you consider
Yeah.
the fractional leader and also the position of the founder that they are in, especially these days when the capital is so hard to to get access to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, when my transition happened, it was back in sort of 2014, and the business actually invested a huge amount of time to create this whole development program to the next level, which was to run whole business units, which is effectively a CRO role. But a lot of businesses don't have that runway. This was a very
Yeah,
successful business with a 20-year history and profitable, but a lot of startups are burning cash. So
exactly.
trying to make that decision is so hard. And like you say, there's a really interesting point here, which we haven't touched on, which you brought up, which is the risk tolerance of that person. To find someone who has the proven track record of the strategy and the execution, who's willing to take a step back in terms of a company who might not have product market fit, and a lot of the things that they would deem that they would need to feel confident to make that move. A fractional person's effectively running their own business. So it just by very character is someone at that stage of their career where they understand their strengths and capabilities to a point where they're willing to back themselves and they have a higher level of risk tolerance, more like a founder than a CRO or VP of sales who only wants to work in Series A and beyond companies. What's your take on that topic around the type of character and risk tolerance that you're going to get access to when you hire fractionals?
Uh, yeah, absolutely, Richard, 100%. Well, I mean, as mentioned above, all the startups go through the same motion, and all of them they need specialized expertise at some point. Some more than others, but all do. I think we agree on that. The good start for any startup founder is to admit that they need help. And once they do, it makes a huge difference, as very often fractional expertise is being kind of like forced upon them by the investors
Sure.
and VCs that are not really seeing the desired level of growth. And that's a very common picture that I'm seeing every day when I'm talking to the founders, where they just being pushed and advised by the VCs to go out there and talk to the fractional leaders and find one.
Sure.
Or the VCs, actually find one and they just push it upon the founders.
Yeah.
So I said, like, very good starting point is just to admit that, okay, I do need help here, and really get along with your ego. The question here is like perhaps when is the right moment to scale, right? Or when is the right moment to hire fractional leader?
Yeah, exactly. What makes a startup a good candidate to hire a fractional leader? That's yeah, exactly. Let's talk about that.
Exactly, yeah. So, and in this case, perhaps it very much depends on the stage of the company. If we eliminate the very very early stage ones, because normally they are perhaps not the greatest fit, either because they don't have the budget or they are not yet ready to hire the fractional CRO because they haven't confirmed the product market fit the sales way, and it's a mess when it comes to the sales engine. Kind of like talking about perhaps more like Series A and above. What really makes a great time to hire the fractional is when they're ready to scale.
Sure.
And when they're ready to scale, there are certain criteria that we have to talk about. Is for example, well, let's be specific. For example, gross customer retention should be 90% and above. Net retention should be 100% and above. LTV to CAC ratio should be 3:1 or better. Quota attainment of the existing sales reps should be at least 50% of the reps at 100%, and at least 70% should be at 70% and above. There should be the evidence of at least one significant sales segment or channel having crossed the the chasm into the early late buyer majority. There should be identified primarily or primary ICP and the buyer persona, and there is a large, clearly identified TAM to support. So those are, I would say, the key criteria when the startup is ready to scale, and that's where you can, hire the fractional chief revenue officer that is in a position to equip you to get there. Because it's also important that you should be at the right stage at the right time, because
Sure.
you can imagine this leader. He doesn't have the magic wand, so it's not that he just turns up and says, okay, you guys do this, and suddenly something starts to grow.
Sure.
There should be the right stage and he or she should be equipped with a certain knowledge, information, your ability to be ready and for the scale as a company to actually make him succeed, or to make him succeed. So and that's why kind of like one of the few things. And of course, for me as a kind of like also the fractional leader, is also important that they do have the capital behind it, right? Because usually the scale and the growth is associated with certain number of financial power behind any company to obviously hire the best people on the market. Because again, the growth is normally fueled by people. That's you start with a strategy, and then people are the second, most important, if not the first most important, mechanism that will get you to the desired level of revenue growth, you name it. So that person, when the startup is ready to scale and all the attributes are there, comes in with his experience, and potentially sometimes very often, which I do as well, come with a package of a lot of connections and a lot of people that they worked in the past with, that they can very quickly go to and either bring with them, or help the startup to hire those people, either the full-time or as a contractors, to make the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the beauties of having conversations with people like you is when we're recruiting talent into business, and we typically work within startups, people want to know that they're going to have a great sales leader, because it's really difficult to sell in a startup space. When you are figuring a lot of stuff out, you don't have the same resources as larger companies, and a lot of businesses want to hire salespeople who have worked in startups rather than in big blue chip companies. But a lot of those people who have worked in startups have had really bad experiences where they haven't had the support, they haven't had the right sales leadership. So if you can tick a box as a founder, which is you've got this very safe pair of hands with a proven track record of moving from here to here, that's on the bus as a hiring attraction thing that we can talk about with people, it makes that startup clearly stand out from the competition who have just put a brand new VP of sales in or promoted someone into that role, but they don't have that track record. Because what all those startup salespeople are looking for is the next unicorn, but that's almost like a bit of a punt. They don't all expect that to happen. It's just the dream that they have some sort of stake in a business that's going to go that big. But at very least, they want to learn and improve their skills. And with the right sales leader in place, they can see a path to making that happen. So I can clearly see why someone like you on board, that would make it a much easier of a job for people like us to say, look, here's what you're going to get access to as part of this journey within the startup.
No, absolutely. And to just to add to that, it kind of like both ways. What it really like makes fascinating, especially if the person is true to themselves. Even myself, when I have the conversations with the founders, and they're looking for someone, for example, to get them from 20 million, 10 million to 50 million ARR, I'm raising the hand and I'm saying, listen, I'm not the right type of person for you. Because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to lose my reputation. And I also, I enjoy seeing the results, and making the difference. And that's obviously only possible if you're working in the same kind of like, environment that you used to, that what needs to be done, that there is a recipe for the success that you've done, and, and you repeat it over and over again in different companies. You kind of like want it to be a win-win, right? So you as a human being, an individual, you want to de-risk it for yourself, because it's our human nature. We like the comfort zone. So my comfort zone as a fractional leader is, to be somewhere between 0, let's say, and 10, maybe 20 million ARR. And that's what I built my kind of reputation on. That's what I built my network on. That's what I have, the salespeople that I worked with in the past that I can use to perhaps get to the desired goals quicker with their help, because again, you can't do it all by yourself. So that's really fascinating, and that's what I like, perhaps the honesty factor that is usually between the fractional and the founders and VCs, because whenever you hire a full-time person, nobody will tell you if they applied that it's not their cup of tea, or they're not sure if they're going to perform on the job, or
Sure.
potentially, it's not really their level of expertise. Most likely, they're not
Yeah.
going to tell that. They will
Yeah.
try to get through, land the job, get the paycheck, potentially get through the, probation period, and then pretty much it. And once they get
Yeah.
the probation period, they sort of, I've seen it also very often. Then they kind of like relax a little bit,
Sure.
and then things don't go well, and then of course, they get a great redundancy checks or whatever.
Sure.
And that's also very, very common, and I'm sure you heard of those stories as well, especially in the early stage startups.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So there's a bit of ground to cover. So let's see how much we can cover. But I know that if someone was watching this and they thought there was some things they would want to ask you, they can probably just reach out to you directly to have a conversation. But
Absolutely.
let's talk about the role of a fractional CRO. So let's say you are the CRO going
Mhm.
into a business. What are the functions and responsibilities that you're going to prioritize in a startup?
Sure. Well, those kind of like, 5 things that I mentioned earlier, which is a strategy, people, process, systems, and metrics.
Okay.
And that's what I will look in. Normally I'll do the assessment, right, of the status quo, so to speak. What are they doing currently? What works, what doesn't, in relation to the strategy, people, process, systems, and metrics.
Yeah.
When I do the assessment, then we will quickly uncover the things that they do well, that still requires building, even that doesn't even exist, or exist to the kind of like below 30% of existence. Things that they do well, and things that needs needs to be improved upon. And then you kind of like, again, based on the stage where they are as a company, because early stage startup need different things than, let's say, the Series B startup. So again, depending on which stage they're at, we then discuss the scope with the founders, agree on the certain metrics and criteria, and end result, and then we kind of like shake hands and we go for it. And that's pretty much how I've been working. And how I like to work, because I kind of like dedicate for the startups that I consulting, because I don't believe in this fractional, in terms of like 1 hour a week, for example. That's again, it does work for the strategy type of guys that I discussed. There are 2 types, right? Go to market kind of strategy, or strategic oversight, and the execution guys. And because I'm the execution guy, I like to be more hands-on, and and usually I say, okay, let's do at least hour, 2 hours a day, where I can be on the ground with the guys, have the same exposure as the full-time person, to all the resources that I need to really move the needle.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much my approach, and that's why for me, as I said, I look at those things, and then I decide which resources do I need in order to get the startup to the end result that the founders and VCs desire.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, perfect. And then, so as an execution-based CRO, what are some of the most common challenges that you've observed in startups that you love to address?
The first most common challenge, and that starts with the PMF debate, right? Product market fit. And that's usually pretty much, if we take the early stage startups as an example here, that's the most common pitfall that the founders fall for, unfortunately, because they just, they sell to their closed network, the product, and it's not the same as try to sell it to the outside of their network, or completely cold. That's why sort of this PMF debate is always the first one that I have with the early stage startups, just to make sure that they really sold outside of their network, that they're really building and scaling go-to-market motion, that there is a repeatability in place, and some predictability in terms of the revenue, because then the next step usually is, okay, if you do have already your existing sales team, that's great. Let's see, how they do, and very often they're struggling, especially unfortunately, 2023 was that year that majority of the sales reps out there didn't meet their targets. So we look into the into their KPIs, we look into their pipeline creation, their sales cycle lengths, and sales funnel, and we kind of break it down, and we go through that. But very often the problem lies not really with the sales team. Very often, problem lies, unfortunately, with the product and go-to-market motion that wasn't really proven by, the PMF wasn't proven the sales way.
Sure.
And that's the most common challenge I see in the early stage startups. Also, I've seen many times, again, it's down to the product, is that product in tech, as you can imagine, it's a super competitive environment. And when you sit in that sort of quadrant, if you take the quadrant and you sit somewhere kind of like in the middle where there is so much competitors, and you kind of like there are so many that serve enterprise, and there are also so many that serve kind of small to mid market. And you sit somewhere in the middle where you sort of kind of like you're serving the small to mid market, but you really want to get to the enterprise. But unfortunately, the competition doesn't allow you to compete neither on features nor the price. And that is a really problematic space where I always advise to the founders, listen, you need to find the new way, the new product effectively, because we won't be able, doesn't matter what I do, whatever tweaks I do to your go-to-market motion or to your sales engine, your product simply doesn't have the ability to scale and get to that next level, to the enterprise, which obviously everybody wants to get to because it's hefty checks. But that's kind of like two major challenges I've been seeing in time and time again within the startups. That starts with the PMF debate, or ability to prove them the PMF the sales way, and then obviously the product is not scalable or not kind of like adjusted to the needs of the market. Because again, if the product is nice to have in a highly competitive environment, doesn't matter if you hire the most genius salesperson, you're just not going to go the way you want it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest red flags we see from a recruitment point of view is if you have a startup company and they're just looking to hire salespeople because they have a black book within that industry. It just doesn't work.
Exactly.
A lot of the time, these companies these salespeople have got black books from working at Oracle or at these large companies where they have an amazing solution to sell. No wonder they've been able to build that relationship. And then suddenly they're working for a startup without that product market fit, who aspirationally wants to break into enterprise, but the product's just not ready. So I think one of the so that's a really key thing. If you want to attract the right sort of salespeople, my experience certainly says don't hire on black book. You need someone who's going to believe in your mission and actually work very well with your sales leadership team to be able to take that product out to market. And it's a collaborative role in a startup. You can't just we're just going to go and do outbound prospecting. It just doesn't work in terms of the metrics of the business normally. It has to be tied into what the go-to-market motion looks like. And it's one of the biggest differences between a VP of sales and a chief revenue officer is that the revenue officer is looking across product, marketing, CS, and sales. So, but I can imagine that's more difficult to do as a fractional. So let's say as a fractional coming in, where that to make that business successful, you need marketing, product, CS, and acquisition to all work together to achieve the goal. What are some of the ways that you would be able to bring those things together, or understand if you could bring those things together to actually help that business to be successful?
It's a great question, and definitely not an easy one to answer.
Sure.
Because again, it's a huge challenge, which again, probably not for the very early stage startups, because they just it's all the things that you mentioned normally is a mess over there. They don't really align, they don't really speak to each other that much, and it's really it's a chaos, but it's a moving chaos, and you can navigate through it, and you can still get to the desired result. But at some point, of course, you will need to address it. And I would say, usually it starts by the hiring the great either fractional leaders or the full-time leaders in each position, because it's head of the customer, right, which takes care of the customer success and account management. It's head of marketing that takes care of lead generation, attribution, lead scoring, and all the things. It's head of sales or chief revenue officer, you name it, that takes care of commercial block. It's kind of like your CTO who takes care of technical stuff and so on and so on. So I would say it really starts by hiring a great leader, because they will know what they're doing, and they will make sure that this first of all their department actually works, and then they will start aligning it and talking to the other leaders, and to actually make sure that the cross-functional communication and work and kind of rules are established, and we work as a one common unit. So that would be like kind of like my first advice to the founders, to make sure that they find a great leader for each individual departments, because again it just doesn't work in silos. At some point you will have to go cross-functional. That's probably the best advice I can give. Of course, in a startup, in my last full-time gig, I didn't have head of sales or anyone reporting directly onto me. I had over 30 direct reports, all to myself, before I actually was able, or we could afford, should I say, to hire the head of sales, or somebody that actually could take a lot of burden from myself. So usually it's a very different story in the startups. You have to work 24/7, as they say, and sometimes you wear many caps, which is normal. But what the fractional allows you to do, which I mentioned before, is really focus on the area of expertise that you are most comfortable with, because you want to demonstrate the quick result, you want to de-risk it for yourself. You are most comfortable with certain levels of expertise, or certain things that you've done it over and over again, and they kind of work. So that's the beauty of the fractional, is that you don't have to worry about those cross-functional things, about politics, about making sure that your CEO likes you, and your peers like you across the different departments. You don't really spend that time on those things. You really focus on to deliver the result as quickly as possible, to make sure that everybody is happy, because you want to justify the paycheck, you want to justify your expertise, you want to get their referrals, and you also want to extend potentially your contract with that company as well. So there are so many great motivators for the fractional leader in place, that doesn't even need to be discussed or addressed by the founders. It just naturally falls into the right place.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you're absolutely right. If you can chop up that budget that you might have in your mind that you'd be using to hire a full-time executive, you could probably get a few fractionals for that, or at least get someone in who's going to help to ask the right questions, so you can actually decide who you do need to hire now, and what you need to get in place for them. Because like you say, you've gone through very meticulously. I want to see the gross and the net dollar retention. I want to know your CAC. I want to know your LTV. Just having that expertise of what good looks like, and having someone ask you those questions is incredibly valuable by itself. And so I suppose, just to wrap this up then, from our point of view, what we love to do is work with early stage businesses from seed all the way through to sort of Series B, Series C at the very, very top end, to hire great sales leaders and salespeople into firms. For you, Alex, let's say someone was watching this and they're going, right, I would love to have access to someone like Alex, and I would love to have someone ask me those sorts of questions to determine what stage I'm at, and what's the right model for me to go and take to reach my next level of growth, and get me to that next stage that I'm looking to go to. Who's your ideal customer, and how is the best way for them to get hold of you to start having a conversation?
Sure. Thanks, Richard. Well, the ideal customer for me would be the early stage startup, anywhere between 0 and 5 million, I would say, ARR. Somebody who went through the product market fit, and they know that they are ready, for scaling. Somebody who admitted for themselves that, okay, they either because they want to de-risk it, or either because they don't want to make a mistake or mishire, which is a key role and a vital position as you know yourself. If you mishire, your first VP sales or your first chief revenue officer, that could basically end your startup.
Yeah.
Because you can easily lose, a couple of years of time, and that is something that you unfortunately can't afford these days. Because usually if you do this mistake, you might not raise again.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much why I would say, okay, come to someone like myself, because very quickly, in a matter of couple of months, you will realize that, okay, this is the person for you, or this person can move the needle, or that person can't really move the needle for me as a business. And of course, again, it all falls down to the certain attributes of the business. Because if somebody comes to me and says, Alex, we are enterprise, we sort of enterprise our ICP, our sales cycle 6 to 12 months, we are sort of closing checks of 100K plus. I would say, sorry guys, I'd love to help you, but I would be honest with you. This is not my cup of tea. This is not my area of expertise. I won't be able to demonstrate the quick results, which will frustrate me, will frustrate you. I don't have extensive experience selling to the big enterprises with 100K plus checks.
Sure.
That's why sort of I'd rather recommend someone from my network for them. But I would say honestly, that's just not going to be a win-win for us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So like really early stage startups targeting SMBs, quite I would say up to 3, maybe up to 6 months sales cycle max. High velocity ideally. That would be kind of like my ideal profile, which I feel comfortable. Could be marketplaces, platform as a service, SaaS,
Sure.
anything along those lines. Because again, it's why I'm saying those things and why I'm narrowing down. Simply because this is something that I'm comfortable with. I know what needs to be done in those certain environments. I've been there, I've done it across several companies, and usually the recipe for the success is more or less the same. When you're talking about SaaS, PaaS, and those criteria that I just described, within SMBs, high velocity, and so on. So I know for a fact that that when I'm going to join and I will try to move that needle, I know the steps that needs to be done
Sure.
from very early stage to, let's say, Series A or Series B, in order to get to the desired result and get this win-win situation that we both desire, myself and the founder.
Sure. Perfect. Wonderful. Well, Alex, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being so generous with it. I think you've shared so many incredible things here for people to digest. And if anyone does want to get in contact with Alex directly, we'll make sure his contact details are below. So Alex, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Richard.
Perfect. And we'll see you in the next edition of Making Revenue Tick. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you soon.